Hello lovers of the world, this is Sinta speaking. I really love reading. I've been trying to get back into it lately, and I recently borrowed this book from the library called the Wintringham Mystery, and I thought that there was still a bit of light in the day before the sun fully sets, so I thought I would film a really quick video about what I thought about it, because I've been meaning to do it while the story was kind of still fresh in my mind. I had finished it maybe 2 days ago or yesterday, I can't remember, but it's still quite fresh in my mind, so I wanted to get it out before I guess forgot about it. I still have some reviews that I've been meaning to get around to filming, and obviously the longer I put it off, the less fresh it'll be in my mind when I eventually sit down and do it. So I thought I might bang this one out as soon as I can, and now it just seemed like a good time. So for the Wintringham Mystery, this is a really interesting book. So the Wintringham Mystery was actually written first in 1927 by Anthony Berkeley, and it's been recently republished, and that's why it was recently released as an audiobook as well. And you could see that people were interested in it because there were 5 people behind me when I had returned the book after I had finished listening to it. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but before then I've never heard of Anthony Berkeley. I've never heard of the story before, so I kind of didn't know what to expect. I remember reading the synopsis of the book first before borrowing it from the library, but I guess by the time I actually sat down and listened to the audiobook, I had already forgotten what it was about. But the thing is that I had borrowed it so way earlier that I saw that I only had 2-3 days left to listen to it, so I was like, I can do that. It's like an 8-hour long book, so I sat down and listened to everything, mostly I think in 2 sittings. So I was really lucky that I managed to persevere instead of just returning it early and stuff. So I'm glad I managed to listen to it because it's a really good book. So anyway, that's enough backstory about my experience reading it. Let's actually talk about the book. So the premise of the story is that Stephen Munroe, who is our protagonist, is I don't know how to call it, a gentleman of leisure. I think that's what the book described him as, but he's a person who is of the elite class. He came from a wealthy family, and he used to be an army officer, but obviously after the war he came back, and instead of investing his passive income from being rich, I guess, I don't know how rich people work, but instead of investing that, he squandered all of it, and now at that point in the beginning of the story, he has no money. So now he is faced with this conundrum of basically having to work for a living. And I thought that was a really interesting premise. First of all, it was because usually a lot of the murder mysteries you read from the golden age, which is when this book is written in and set in, a lot of the protagonists, a lot of the detectives tend to be people of that wealthier class. And I think I've only ever seen one story that was where the detective was not a fancy upper class person, and so this was a really refreshing take. I was really curious to see how this was going to take. Anyway, so Stephen Munroe, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we started the story, and then Stephen has basically taken on a job as a footman in this house, in this big country house called Wintringham Hall. At the beginning of the story, he's telling his butler that, oh, I'm basically poor. I can't live in this house anymore, and I have to fire you. I'm going to work as a footman in this place called Wintringham Hall, and here's 1 month's worth of salary. And I thought it was really funny because the butler's like, I know this, and I love you.
I have done nothing ever in my life.
I know this, and I love you.
Money, please!
I know this, and I have gone out of my way to secure a spot in that same country house as their undergardener. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cute, actually. In this big country house, there are these group of young people. For the life of me, I can't understand why these group of young people are in the country house in the first place. It must be a British, old-timey thing. But the lady of the house of Wintringham Hall, Lady Susan, she just hosts these group of young people at her place, I guess. I don't know why. Because she doesn't like any of them. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then so Stephen Munroe is there, he's working, and then the group of people kind of come in as one by one, we get introduced to them. And then big surprise, his ex-girlfriend Pauline happens to be staying at the same house. So it's like, the drama. Oh, and also Freddie, who is Stephen's old classmate back in their schoolboy days or something. He's there too, and he's like, hey,
wait a minute, hold on.
It's you. And then he goes around telling everybody like, oh yeah, Stephen, he's poor now.
I was poor.
Yeah.
Poor. Hi, poor. How's your broke mom?
Boo-hoo, no money.
I thought I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so Stephen, because Freddie blabs his story to like literally anybody, he gets roped into this seance that happens later in the evening, and one of the guests disappear during the seance. And they're like, where could Cicely be? Where has Cicely gone? And but that's basically the premise of the story. And from here on out, it's going to be spoilers, because that is what I want to do. I want to talk about the story and everything that I liked and disliked about it. But I gotta say, I did like this story because it was on the lighthearted side. It's a more unconventional story that I've encountered, I suppose. And I read Agatha Christie, so it's like, how much more unconventional can you get? I really like this book because it was on the lighthearted side. It was very fun. It was very entertaining. And the mystery was quite good, but I feel like the characters are the ones that really keep up that really fun atmosphere. So let's talk about the characters then. Stephen, kind of boring, but pretty likable. He's kind of described as this guy who's kind of looks at the face of, I don't know, looks at situations and has a good humor about it. So I think he makes for a good protagonist, that he's likable for the readers, but he's also likable for the people around him. And he's very inoffensive. Like, he doesn't have any particular glaring flaws that make him kind of, rub against other people, which makes for a good detective because it's easy for you to get information out of the suspects, so to speak. But then there's not as much opportunity for conflicts between other people and other characters in the story. But I did like him. As for Pauline, his love interest, she was likable as well. Again, no glaring flaws that make her more interesting or compelling. And she was just like a nice, good, kind girl. But she does have conviction, which I do appreciate. I guess it's hard for me to not compare this to another murder mystery romance novel that I had read recently called, what is it called again? Murder at Morlington Hall, between Lindy and Stella. And because that's the only romance mystery novel that I've read so far, it's kind of easy to make comparisons between them. I guess I liked Pauline because she seemed a lot more, she just had more conviction, I guess, whereas Stella, I think I was thinking about how Stella didn't have a lot of flaws, but I didn't like her, whereas Pauline doesn't have a lot of flaws either, but I was still able to like her anyways. Interesting stuff. I don't know how to explain it, but I think it just depends on whether or not your characters are active people, active agents in the story. And I think Pauline was a pretty active agent. I really liked how she finagled an engagement out of Stephen as well. I thought that was quite cool. I mean, especially for a story written in this time, 1927, as opposed to Murder at Morlington Hall, which was written a lot more recently. So I kind of was like, for a book written at that time, a woman who was very, was really interesting to see, especially since the guy who wrote it was a guy. But as for them as a pair, as a couple, a pair of detectives, they made for a pretty good set of detectives. They had good chemistry. They bounced ideas off of each other. I like that they complemented each other a lot. They really saw each other as smart, intelligent, and they really saw each other as worthy partners. It was really apparent at how close and how friendly they were. So I thought that was really refreshing, comparing, I guess, to all the times that I've read Hercule Poirot books, and a lot of times his relationship with, for example, Captain Hastings tends to be a bit more antagonistic sometimes, and I'm like, are you guys really friends? Like, why are y'all telling each other? But that's probably just my personal preference. But yeah, they are, again, the more likable characters. So it was really easy for them to get information out of each suspect. Like, for example, like Pauline would be able to talk to all the female characters because she's a woman. And then Stephen obviously was able to talk to all the male characters because he's a man and stuff. So I think in a way they kind of balance each other off in that sense, in purely utilitarian terms. But again, because they're so bland and inoffensive, there's not really much there's no compelling depth to them. But that's fair enough, because all the supporting cast of characters surrounding them makes up for it. And I think in a way, because all the other characters in the story are so kooky and quirky and fun, that them in comparison just seems so normal when they are interacting with the other people. And obviously the vice versa is the same. The kooky characters seem quirkier and kookier when you see them interacting with this bland couple. So I really like that. Speaking of the kooky cast of characters, Lady Susan, I didn't know what to think of her. She was a bit like, I didn't like how she bullies her younger niece, I guess. It made me feel bad for the niece. But obviously, like, she is a very... The story very much paints her as like a good force in Stephen's life.
I have done nothing ever in my life.
I know this. And I love you.
From like giving him all these opportunities, like letting him be the one to solve the mystery of what's happening and stuff, like giving him so much leeway even though he is basically a stranger to her. That was obviously it obviously paints her in a very good light. But still, I was kind of just like, why do you have to pick on Millicent so much? She's so like, you know. Millicent, speaking of Millicent, I guess the story just really makes you want to feel bad for her. Obviously, like, she had her husband Martin, who was the bad guy. First of all, she just kept getting bullied, and she seems like such a nervous wreck the entire time. It just makes you want to like give her a hug or something. Her nervousness was obviously her thing. Like, every cast of characters has a thing. Like, Lady Susan's like the old matronly, no nonsense kind of old lady who has power over everyone and who has wisdom. Millicent is kind of just like the mousy, shy, nervous, anxious kind of caretaker. My favorite character...
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
My favorite character was Annette Agnew. So I thought she was the funniest thing. I thought Annette was the funniest character in the entire story. First of all, she was moaning and wailing about wanting to play bridge in the first half, and I was like, oh my god, that's so funny. And then obviously every time she was there, she would make funny jokes, and she was like a real scene stealer for me. Like, every time she was mentioned, she would be making like funny quips. She was just a delight to have in the story. She is purposefully, like, I don't want to say antagonistic, but she loves to stir up drama, but she does it in a really endearing way. So it's kind of just, I don't know, I was like, yeah, go stir up drama, girly. You do you.
Oh, yes!
I mean, somebody has to stir up the drama, but I'm just glad that it was her. And I also just like, speaking of female characters that are funny, I love that there's a character named Baby. Like, huh? I was just like, you know how it's funny how everybody thinks that like old-timey people are stiff and formal and stuff like that. Like, we can't really imagine people of the olden days to be fun and exciting or goofy. But then this guy just writes a character named Baby.
Darling, if you have a baby, you can't be the baby.
No, well, her name's not really Baby, but everybody just calls her Baby. It's like Baby Calympton. Yeah, anyway, more characters. Henry, very sarcastic and languid fellow. I liked him, if only because he added flavor. I'm like, yes, be sarcastic. I appreciate that. I also liked it because I can totally see the type of man that guy is, because I've met them. You know, I know exactly how he acts. I've seen it, I can see it in my eyes. Like, it's so vivid to me because that person still exists today. So again, it's like, it's interesting to see that, you know, people don't change even in a different time, in a different place. I did not like Freddy. He was really annoying during the seance. He was just like yelling, and it's like, don't spoil it. And I'm like, oh my god, everybody shut up. I actually, that him moaning and yelling and screaming, crying, screaming, throwing up in the seance actually made me suspect him a few times, because I'm like, there's no way that this hapless idiot is so completely hapless and idiotic. I thought that he was a bit sus just because he seemed so innocent, but no, he was innocent. I thought he was like wailing and yelling just because he needed the seance. He needed the room to be darker for longer, and that's why he kept telling people, it's like, no, we have to keep going, because he was doing something in the dark that like he wasn't finished with yet. So that was like a theory that I had. Let's talk about the actual story itself. I thought it was really funny and cute. It was a really good mystery to kind of like unravel yourself. But there were parts where I felt like I was cheated out of the story that I signed up for in a way. I had assumed that the story was going to be about Stephen navigating his new life as a footman, as somebody who has to work for a living, who used to be from here and now has fallen from here. And the deus ex machina of Lady Susan granting him access to the house as a guest, and then as like her own private detective person, felt like I felt like cheating, you know. I was really looking forward to seeing how Stephen would have to navigate through his life as a servant, as like working and having to bowing down to guests who in a different life would have been his equal, and taking orders from people who were below his station previously, like Martin and stuff like that. I was really interested to see that, because for so long the face of the golden age of detective stories have always been like the rich and wealthy people and stuff like that. So I was really looking forward to seeing not just a poor person be the main character and be the person to solve the mystery and do stuff in the mystery. I was not only excited to see that character, but I was also excited to see a character who specifically used to be rich and then had to go downgrade to the ladder of social hierarchy. I was really interested to see that, and I felt like I didn't really get to see it. He was like a footman for like half a day, and then he was elevated to guest, which I guess makes sense if he is trying to solve a mystery from an author's point of view, because if you're a servant, there's no way that you have the time to solve a mystery or the opportunity to solve a mystery. You would get fired immediately because you were poking your nose into other people's business. It doesn't matter if he had Pauline on his side because that's his girlfriend or whatever. It doesn't matter that he had somebody on his side, but that would just not fly. So yeah, I guess I understood like why it had to happen, but I still really wanted to see a book that tackled like classism a little bit more, especially because it was of that time, you know, like what does an author in 1927 writing detective fiction think about classism? I was interested to see that, but I guess I didn't really see it in the way that I wanted to, so it's okay. But I think even the fact that an author really did want to write a character, a protagonist that was somebody who used to be here and is now here, that in itself is interesting, especially for 1927, because that was after World War One, because obviously Stephen was in World War One, but before World War Two. So there is definitely that post-war vibe going on, but not to the extent of World War Two yet. And I guess there's so much class ideas floating in the novel itself anyway. Like first, obviously Stephen is like the biggest example, but Pauline's father going bankrupt is another thing that I thought was like, oh, interesting element. Like your love interest's father and her life is also on the brink of being in the same situation as yours. So I again was interested in that and the fact that it was there. But again, obviously it gets wrapped up really nicely in a happy ending, which good for Pauline, I guess, and good on Stephen for figuring out how to fix it and stuff. Obviously it shows how much he loves her, and it's a very good thing for his character to show, like to show the reader that he is somebody that we can trust. Speaking of Pauline, oh my god, I do be talking. I need to drink something. Anyway, speaking of Pauline, her fiance, Sir Julius. I don't know if he's really a sir. He's called Sir Julius, but I got the vibe that he was new money. And again, that was something I wrote down. I was like, oh, interesting class dynamics shifting around. Obviously, old money is painted. Okay, obviously, old money is painted as, you know, good, like with Lady Susan and Stephen, I guess, if he counts. And Pauline and her father and stuff. Old money is good. New money, bad. You know, Sir Julius is like, has no manners. He's annoying. He's not friendly. Nobody likes him.
You're ugly. You're disgusting. I'm going to kill you. Give me $200.
He doesn't know how to act in proper society, and that's something that I also noticed in Murder at Morlington Hall, where Stella's father is really annoying, but she is not. And I was kind of like, that doesn't add up. I don't know why your father, anyway, the fiance being the way that he is presented is interesting, obviously, because like 1927, they still have very lofty ideas about, you know, who deserves to be wealthy and who deserves to not be wealthy, and like there's a strict social hierarchy that should be upheld. And even at the end of the novel, we see that Stephen gets his happy ending. Like, even though he's working, even though he has to earn his own wage, the fact that his anxiety had been money, and like he couldn't marry Pauline in the first place because he is poor. That was obviously really interesting to have. But the fact that by the end of the novel, it all gets reverted back to the status quo. Like, Sir Julius is like gonna be in prison, it's implied, and Pauline's father is going to make more money, and Stephen is going to work, but not in a really servant classy. He's not going to be in the servant class anymore. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, what do I think about this novel? I think it was good. I like it a lot. Well, I think I should wrap this up really soon because there's no light anymore, and I had to start using my ring light, as you can see, and like the lighting is really wacky and fun. It's a kind of mystery novel that I would recommend a novice who hasn't had a lot of experience with detective fiction of this particular time, because it was very easy to read. There's no stuffy language, and everybody is very fresh and upbeat, so it's easy to like relate to them. So I would definitely recommend that for a novice. But for anyone who is an expert, I guess, in detective crime mystery novels, I would recommend this to them too, because it's got that same, like, it's got that classic golden age vibe, but it's fun. So good book. 3 out of 5 stars. Love to see it. Okay, I think that's it. My ring light is kind of blinding me, and it's way too dark now, so I'm gonna skedaddle. Thank you so much for listening to this review. I hope you liked it. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and if you want to see more of my work, you can subscribe. I've got my social media links down in the description, as well as my Ko-fi and Patreon page if you want to support my work. I'll see you guys next week. And worthy partners.